Blog Talk Radio.
You gotta wake up to a world that's real. You gotta rise up and make it feel. Life in full measure is more than just pleasure. Wake up and live. You gotta wake up to a world in need. You gotta get up and begin to lead. A life in full measure is more than just pleasure. Wake up and live.
Hello and welcome. Today is, today is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2014. This is Paul Sandhu coming to you live with another episode of Wake Up and Live Radio. Today I will be speaking with V, the guerrilla economist whose writings and recordings can be found on his website, roguemoney.net. So there seems to be some kind of echo here, which I will fix in a minute, but in the meantime I'm going to bring V on. Hello there, V, are you with us?
Yes, I am, Paul. It's great to be on. Yes, Paul.
Okay, that seems to be better. Sorry about that, my friend. How are you today, V?
Well, I'm doing great. I think, since the last time we spoke, I mean, look at how many things have happened. The last time we spoke, we were just, tossing the idea back and forth and, getting into some topics about multinational banks as well as, the intermarriage between them and the intelligence agencies, as well as them having hit teams. And now we have, recently within the last few weeks, a spate of so-called banker suicides. One suicide was a gentleman who shot himself 6 times with a nail gun.
I read about that. That was hilarious. That reminds me of the story about this guy in California, this journalist who apparently committed suicide by shooting himself twice in the head. Now, this story is even exceeds that one.
Yes. You can imagine that gentleman trying to kill himself, and he shoots himself with a nail gun, and he's like, oh, that didn't work. Let me try that again. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, one more time. Oh, that didn't work. This is the kind of nonsense that the mainstream media wants you to believe. And folks, it's incredible what's going on. These men are being taken out. I have it from my sources that have said that what's happening right now is a clean house procedure. They're tying up all the loose ends because there's massive fraud, not only in the oil pricing market, which all of a sudden a Wall Street Journal investigative reporter who has been investigating the fraud in the oil markets. He all of a sudden disappears. No one knows where he's at. He's been missing since January the 11th. You also have incredible fraud with LIBOR. And I know most of you forgot LIBOR and all the scandal with LIBOR. The fact is, LIBOR affected over $800 trillion. That's how much LIBOR has affected the whole global economy, okay? So, massive scandal with LIBOR, massive scandal in the Forex markets, all right? Massive scandal in the precious metals market, especially in relation to gold. All these things are coming to a head. And, Paul, one of the things I've recently put on my website, I actually wrote an article. One of the things I said was this. Since 1971, we've been running this pure fiat scheme, this experiment. We've been running it, free of any sort of gold backing, okay? So when you are running without any sort of an anchor, what you begin to have is a severe lack of fundamentals. And severe lack of fundamental leads to severe lack of discipline. And when you don't have any discipline within your markets, what you have in place of that is outright fraud and lies on every level. And that's where we're at economically and in the market as a whole. I don't know if today you've seen Janet Yellen come out and talk about her basically her first official press conference as the Fed Reserve Chairman, and to prove to the world how out of touch with reality this woman is. She's talking about, we're going to keep sticking to the script. We're going to keep doing what we're doing until we see an improvement in the labor market. Folks, this woman has no answers. Nothing whatsoever. And so you see that, you see the market respond to this by rallying the other day. And there's nothing anymore that makes any sort of sense.
So what you're saying, V, is then that when all these markets, whether it's LIBOR, whether it's the Forex, whether it's the gold, precious metals, it's all based on corruption and fraud. And when it's all based on that, then obviously there can absolutely never be any fundamentals. How do you make an analysis in a situation like this, where the rules are changing even as the game is being played?
Well, one thing history has clearly demonstrated to us and clearly shown us time and time again is when a system completely becomes unhinged, or when it completely does not have any sort of discipline, okay, any sort of fundamentals, what you have is an unsustainable system. It's not sustainable. So anything that is not sustainable has an end point. So what we need to do as people who are what the mainstream media likes to call us contrarians, or conspiracy theorists, or whatever, or somebody who's awake and alert and who understands the real situation, what we need to do is take a step back and allow the thing to fall, allow this train wreck to come to fruition. But we need to be mindful, not of the little micro signs, but the big macro signs, the big international moves. Because what's happening right now is the world is getting away from the dollar. And you're seeing all sorts of different trade blocks, from the BRICS to the ASEAN nations of Southeast Asia. You see the recent gold for oil trade that they're doing with India, Iran, and Turkey, which is a huge thing. You see the alignment that's a couple of years ago that the South American countries are trying to do. Now you see incredible amounts of economic turmoil within South America, which is orchestrated internally by assets from the international banksters. Okay, I mean, look at Argentina, Paul. Again, in the midst of a massive currency collapse, they are replaying 2001 to a T. And that is something that we need to take a good, hard look at, because that's the same thing that's going to happen here. I mean, if anybody remembers the 2001 collapse in Argentina, I mean, most smart people in Argentina had their money in dollars, and they had it in the bank. And then all of a sudden there was a bank holiday, and they wake up, and after the bank holiday's over, and surprise, surprise, your dollars are gone, and in place of your dollars were worthless pesos. It was pure, outright theft. And the last time that we spoke, Paul, we kind of talked about the bail-ins. We talked about Dodd-Frank. And folks, they've codified and written into law that they're going to rob you. What more proof do you need? They've codified and written into law that the collapse of the United States economy and the end of the dollar is going to happen. And then people say to me, well...
Sorry, I was just going to comment that they are absolutely aware that this is ongoing. So all the players in this game, whether it's the Americans, they're setting themselves up for how to handle the collapse, and the Chinese and the Russians, they're doing everybody's doing things to protect themselves. So we can learn from them and take steps to protect ourselves as individuals as well, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to understand. I think it was one of my sources who knew an investor from Texas, and it was Kyle Bass. And he was in a meeting with, at that time, the Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner. And Geithner let it slip. Here they are. They're looking at insurmountable odds within the market, insurmountable, unfixable issues within the economy. And what does Geithner say? Geithner says, we're going to kill the dollar. They know what's going on. You see, when you have a happenstance occurrence, you can say that it's an accident. But when you have a successive events, one after the other, after the other, after the other, then, my friend, you don't have an accident. You have a well-played-out agenda. And they are going to kill the dollar. They know that. And they've written that into law is what I'm trying to tell people. And people ask me, well, V, how do you write that into law? What do you mean by that? Well, look at it this way. Since the 2008 collapse, Paul, they have written over 400,000 pages of regulations that will ensure the destruction of the economy. And they did that on purpose. That's what people don't get. Okay? And so you have this fifth column at work, dismantling the U.S. economy and getting ready for a post-dollar world. And then you have another factor that's trying to fight and keep this petrodollar scheme going as long as possible in order to milk all the wealth and all the benefits of America riding, how we say, riding fat on the hog as the world reserve currency status. A status that we don't even deserve no more, and because we literally are, for all intents and purposes, pretty much like a second or even a third world country.
We did this, taking a little step back here, this is a script that just keeps repeating itself. Now, if I recall correctly, this thing with Latin America, for example, we've gone through this, like you said, in Argentina in 2001, and going further back, it was like with Brazil, and again, like some of those Latin American countries back in the 80s, or it was the late 70s, that, every 10 years or so, this whole script plays out in some different part of the world. Then you had the Asian currency crises, and it's always something that has been orchestrated by these bankers, whether they are in New York or in London or wherever they're sitting, that they are orchestrating this, playing whole nations and regions for there to fatten their own pockets. Meanwhile, they are, making a lot of people destitute. For example, I was reading about Argentina back in 2001 when they had, their physicians and doctors who had a great lifestyle prior to that event, and suddenly they were like scrambling, going through garbage just to find enough food to eat. These are true stories. So is that what you think lies ahead for, the fat cat countries like the USA, Canada, Western European countries, the ones that are still fat cats, like, that haven't seen the total devastation that has occurred, for example, in Greece?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're going to be much worse. We're going to be so much worse than any other country in the Eurozone. Simply put, one of the things I said the last time we were on, I said, we've had the luxury of exporting our inflation. We have the luxury of having our currency as the world reserve currency. And so now when people are dumping the dollar, okay, and they're trying to get away from the dollar, all those chickens are going to come home to roost. In other words, all those dollars that are out there in free flow and circulation, they're going to be coming back here because it's no longer going to be accepted as a means for settlement of trade and payment of debt. It's no longer going to be accepted. So we're going to be swimming in the very thing that we've been printing. And that's what the average American doesn't get. We talk about the doctors in Argentina dumpster diving. And the same thing happened in Greece. You had doctors, you had PhD professors dumpster diving. You had parents with children who could no longer afford their children, that the government had to create what's called children drop-off boxes, where if you don't want your baby, you put the baby in a box, and then you put a box next to the hospital or a fire department or a police station, and the box has a flashing light and a siren on there to alert the people around them there's a child in there. I mean, these are the kind of things that are happening in Greece. You look at Spain. You know, the issue with Spain is there's a vast amount of property that were developed that are just lying empty. You know, people talk about the empty cities in China. Well, Spain is rapidly becoming like that in the sense of there's empty cities all over there because so many of the educated Spaniards are leaving Spain. They're going over into the UK trying to find jobs. They're going anywhere to find jobs. The same thing is going to happen here, but it's going to be much, much worse for the American. And one of the things that people, I always tell people, have a means, start preparing for these types of things. Start preparing for disruptions. And I don't say that to be alarmist. I mean, you take a look at what's happening on Argentina, where in one day you had the peso drop 15 to 20%, and then all of a sudden you had all these shop owners and these retail stores and these department stores and these grocery stores that were not going to sell you anything because they themselves don't know what the price of that good that they're selling would be tomorrow because of the price volatility. So why would they sell anything to you? So now you're creating a massive vacuum and strain in the system for supplies, for goods, and essential services. Magnify that by 10 because that's how it's going to be in the United States.
Okay. Now, these signs that this is happening, I watched this little YouTube documentary. It was about 10 minutes long, which was recorded, I think, back in 2005, 2006. There was a guy who was asking people that work on and along Wall Street whether they thought that the dollar was going to collapse. And you should have seen some of the people. They were so confident that event was an impossibility. These people, especially who were on Wall Street there, they could not even fathom that the dollar would one day no longer be king in the world of currencies. But the signs are, it's not just signs anymore. It's very apparent that this is happening. And China, for example, from what I've been reading, they've been buying things right, left, and center all across the world. And what do you think they'll be using to do that? It's all there. So it seems like they're already dumping the dollar in a very big way, but it's being kept, sort of the lid is being kept on it, and it is not being announced openly. But how long do you think it will be before all this is out in the open and it can no longer be kept hidden?
I think that day is fast approaching. I don't know exactly when that would be, but you just know it in your heart and in your spirit that these things cannot be suppressed for this long. It's one thing to have fraud in one market, but when systemically the whole system is fraudulent, then you have a problem. Then you become like the boy. We're all familiar with the story of the little boy who puts his finger in the dike, trying to prevent that dike from breaking. And all of a sudden, you put enough of your fingers, and then next thing it's your toes. Eventually, you run out of fingers and toes, and the dam breaks, and then you're flooded with water. You can hold back data. You can hold back economic principles. You can hold back market fundamentals, but you can only do so for so long before those fundamentals overtake you, before those market principles drown you, before the truth exposes you. And that's exactly what's going to happen with this whole entire scheme. Paul, the world is sick and tired of the Anglo-American banking structure. They're sick and tired of it. They're sick and tired of the fraud. They're sick and tired of the fraudulent numbers. Now, you talk to any one of these cronies on Wall Street. Now, I've talked to a number of Wall Street traders. At the trading level, they have no clue. To them, it's a video game. To them, it's not even real. To them, they have no connection with it. Because these are not people who are looking at macroeconomic data. Okay? These are guys who are looking at individual stocks, individual equities, and they're making trades based upon that. That is this level and the scope, and that's where their expertise ends. So these guys have no clue. These guys are the equivalent of people having a party while the Titanic is sinking. They're the equivalent of those trying to upgrade to first class while the boat is taking on water. So these are not the people that we need to look to. The answer is not Wall Street. Wall Street's part of the problem. The answer lies in the macro data that's coming out from the rest of the world. Look at China. Okay? Look at India. Look at what's happening to the rest of the world. What are they doing? There is a massive smash and grab for hard assets. And that's the thing that people need to understand. Look, if the Chinese, the Indians, the Russians, the people in Southeast Asia, if they are making a smash and grab right now for hard assets, particularly gold, more than anything else, what do you think you should be doing? What do you think they know that you don't know? Now, the average American knows who wins American Idol. They know who's the latest reality show superstar. They know what happened to Justin Bieber. These are the things that cloud the Americans' minds. The rest of the world don't care about things like that. I mean, you take, for instance, India, okay? India, even with the government restrictions that has to do with the 91 IMF agreements, okay, even with those restrictions, the Indian population is buying gold at a ravenous pace. The Chinese buying gold and encouraging their population to buy gold at a ravenous pace because they know what's coming down the pike. And you look at the global realignments. Folks, here's the deal. You look at the American petrodollar system, which from its foundation is faulty, okay? It's based on the idea that Middle Eastern oil, particularly Saudi Arabian oil, will flow perpetually forever, okay? So we have a model in place of unlimited growth, but we're facing limited resources. The truth of the matter is many countries in the Middle East are tapping out their oil reserves, okay? They're running out. Then you look at a world power, okay, who has the largest reserves of oil in the world. That's the Russians. So what do the Russians do? This happened, I believe, about, I think, in 2012, I believe it happened, where the Russians made an agreement with China that they're going to allow China to be the wholesaler of Russian oil. Okay, think about that. In other words, they're the ones...
One second. So does that mean that the Russians and Chinese are setting up an oil bourse or something to compete with the OPEC or the one that's controlled by the Westerners?
Absolutely. You see, the Russians know, okay? The Russians know that OPEC is tapping out. Every year, the reports coming out from numerous wells from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, from many of the Bahrain, Qatar, Oman. These wells are starting to tap. Kuwait, they're starting to tap out. Iraq is starting to tap out. They're not producing what a lot of the Westerners thought they would. So the whole entire petrodollar scheme is based on, number one, a region that's starting to tap out for oil, and number two, a region that's highly volatile. Now take it to Russia. You have pretty much a stable government. They've partnered up with the Chinese. They're setting up their oil trading blocks, okay? And they're going to be trading oil bypassing the dollar. The Iranians, okay, the Iranians have 10 times more oil than the Iraqis. They're the biggest oil power right now in the Middle East, more so than even Saudi Arabia. Why do you think Saudi Arabia has been funding Al-Qaeda, has been heavily invested in Syria? I was one of the first guys to break the whole story that the whole Syria debacle is nothing but a pipeline deal between Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the European markets, bypassing the Russians and the strangle and the monopoly that Gazprom has with the European Union. Okay, but what you see is the Saudis are doing whatever they can, okay, to block the Iranians, all right? And Russia has a vested interest in Iran. Now you take Iranian oil, and then you take Russian oil, and then, Paul, what do you have? You have the largest oil reserves in the world. Just those two it's unmatched. And what are they doing? They're forming trading blocks where you will be able to buy oil bypassing the dollar. So cuts off the middleman, cuts off all these unnecessary fees, and they're going to be using gold. Heck, they already are using gold. Look at the deal that's been done with the Indians, the Iranians, and the Turks, where that trifecta right there is allowing oil to be sold and paid for in gold. I mean, these are huge developments. So the world's already realigning. And then you look at the European Union. You look at the fact that, last time I was on, I've told you that, you had one of the heads of Forex say it's wonderful that the EU has set up a yuan currency swap, okay, with the Chinese bypassing the dollar because the dollar is volatile. Here's the head of the Forex saying that.
Yes.
Tremendous.
Yes. I read that, yeah.
So we see this global realignment. And that's what I think that the Americans are missing, is we are being left as the only kid alone in the playground. All the other kids are taking their balls and they're taking their toys and they're leaving. They don't want to play with us anymore. Why? Because we have an attitude problem. Because we can't seem to mind our own business. We have a gunboat diplomacy where, look, Paul, the only thing we have left in America are paper and bombs. That's it. That's the only thing we make, paper and bombs. If we can't throw paper at it, in other words, throw money at the problem to fix it, what do, Paul? We blow it up. The world does not want to deal with a nation that's only solution is either paper or bombs. It's the only thing we have left.
I would agree with that. Actually, I was talking to Jim Willie last week, and he said that the reason why London backed out of not going to war with Syria was because they want to set up a yuan trading facility in London. London's biggest business, of course, is money and finance, and they want to be in there with this yuan because they know that it's coming up as a competing currency to the dollar anyways, and maybe even its replacement. So they are positioning themselves already to do that, and that sort of made sense to me. Would you have you heard anything about that? Why?
Absolutely. Absolutely. City of London, all the major players, Lloyd's, Barclays, Standard Chartered, all these guys are, heck, even RBS at some level. They're all prepping for a yuan swap. They're already, if they don't already have it up, in the final stages of it. They know that. You see, the Brits, they've been through this thing. They've had their world reserve currency status taken away from them. The
right.
Brits, I think it was World War I or World War II, they had their Suez moment where they were, it was after World War II, they had their Suez moment where they were chased out of the Suez region by Nasser, okay? And that was pretty much the end of the British Empire. Okay, that was their Suez moment. Syria, okay, what sent America packing up and leaving? Syria was America's Suez movement. Syria was the defining moment where the American empire said, okay, we're over. It's done. That's the biggest sign, folks, because let me tell you something, guys. When was the last time anybody told America to go take a hike? When was the last time that has happened? It's never happened. And who brokered that deal? Well, the Chinese and the Russians. So what made the Chinese and the Russians, what did they have? What sword of Damocles did they have over the Americans' heads in order for the Americans to turn tail and run? Well, simply this. Get the heck out of here. We're going to dump your T-bombs. We're going to dump your dollar. And that's what caused the U.S. to go. Because we're outclassed. We have nothing left. And yes, the finance, the banksters in London, they saw that too. They seen the blood in the water. And they know that the future is not the dollar. That's why they're setting up the yuan swaps. It's going to be, look, the world, the East is already realigning to the reality that the dollar's done. It's just that we haven't caught up to that reality because we're still, living with our heads in the sand, so to speak.
So for all intents and purposes, this swap facility may already be in place, but it hasn't been publicly announced yet.
Correct. Absolutely. Most of the mechanisms, Paul, that are being prepped, okay, look, these guys are smart. So when the big numbers are dictating the dollar's going to end, okay, when those numbers are indicating that, well, what's going to happen? Well, these guys are going to take the necessary steps in order for them to catch the next trend and to capitalize and leverage the newest thing that's in the market, and that's going to be the yuan. So they already have those mechanisms in place. They're just waiting for the curtain to come down on the U.S. and on the dollar so they can step in and move on with everything else. So the Brits are already set up. Okay, they're already set up. They're just waiting for the final announcement to put the the finishing touches on there. The EU's already set up. The Australians are set up. The New Zealanders are set up. The developed world is already set. Look, 24 countries, 24 of the largest economies in the world have already set up yuan swaps in place of the dollar. Why? Because they see the handwriting on the wall.
If 24 of the biggest countries in the world have already done it, then the rest of the world doesn't matter anyhow, because those 24 are basically the economy of the world anyways. Like the bottom 150 countries, they really are nothing, like the nations in Africa and all the small countries in Asia and stuff. So if this has already been done by the biggest players in the game, then I would have to conclude that it's game over for the dollar.
It's done. And that's the thing that I'm trying to get across to people. It's not a question of, if it happens, it's when. I mean, you have to have a proper perspective on this. In 2012, in June, I stated that, and my alert was plastered all over the internet and on YouTube and whatnot. I stated that the euro is a unofficially dead currency. And what unofficially dead currency simply means, okay, is that the major players are out. In other words, the big sharks have already swam out to sea. They don't want any more of this. Okay? They've picked the meat from the carcass and they're swimming out to open water. Okay? The dollar, okay, is done. And I think it died in the fall of 2013. Okay? It's unofficially killed. What the dollar is waiting for is an official statement saying that it's done. Okay? And that official statement is coming soon because, like I said, when you have unsustainability, it ends at some point. And that point is coming very soon. And I believe when we have, because the system, Paul, is under massive stress, okay? Massive stress. That the only way they can fix the problem is to have a currency reset. Okay, we've heard that terminology thrown out a lot and talked about. But
so
that reset...
What does that entail, a currency reset? Can you expound on that, please?
Well, there's a lot of different competing ideas and models currently at the moment. But what is being proposed, what are the big front runners on the currency reset? Okay, and what you see the Chinese getting behind, the Russians getting behind, pretty much the entire BRICS, as well as the ASEAN trading blocks are getting behind, is a gold-backed trade note. And that's the thing that a lot of them want, where, let's just say you have your dollar or your Norwegian kroner or whatever, those currencies will be used within your own borders. So if you want to, trade, you can't just go ahead and trade, your currency and then adjust it for the other currency in order to buy a good. What that simply means is that you will be able to, you'll have to get gold in order to trade a particular product, let's say like oil. So that's what it means. So that's the big competing idea right now. There's a couple others. And there's a power struggle.
Interrupt for 1 second. I don't. That may not be an idea. This is you are actually confirming a lot of the things that Jim Willie was talking about, and that's exactly what he said. That this gold trade settlement is not just an idea; it is actually implemented even as we speak, and this will be here sooner, or it may already be. Some form of it may already be like all these bilateral and multilateral deals that a lot of these countries, especially China, has done with most of the world. This is something like that may already be in place, and it is just, again, waiting an official pronouncement. And what's happening, he said, is that the BRICS countries, they are actually setting up a competing bank, because you need to have your own banking system to do this kind of gold trade settlement notes, etc. You can't go through the Western banking system, which has already screwed you so badly. So that is what's in the works, and once that is in place, then that is the Eastern Bloc will have set up its own banking facilities to compete directly with the Western Bloc. And the Western Bloc is on its way down. I was just reading today that Barclays is laying off 12,000 people. So
Absolutely.
Would you agree with this?
Yeah, I mean that's the move, and the majority idea is that is that gold-backed trade note, and that's the proposition that's being pushed by the Chinese. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that are being implemented for it, or if it has not already done so. Now, that being said, we have to take a step back geostrategically now, and we begin to see a picture that's kind of alarming. You see, these Western banksters, these guys do not want to go out without a fight, okay? What did, on the 22nd of January, Shinzo Abe, he was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, okay? And what did he say? Abe, in no uncertain terms, said that the world must stand up to China. Now, we all know about the tensions between the Chinese and the Japanese over the Senkaku Gayu Islands, okay? We know about that tension. Now, what I am starting to really understand is this guy Abe has done everything he can in order to stir up strife, tension, problems, I mean, you name it, with the Chinese. Japan, Paul, has always been an errand boy of the West, okay? During the Cold War, Japan was the site of massive amounts of money laundering, okay, that we did with the Russian ruble in order to help collapse the Russian economy. Most people don't know that. But Japan and South Korea were the two instruments that we used in order to bring that economic collapse of the Soviet Union down, okay? Now, the Japanese are all of a sudden, guess what they're doing, Paul? They're courting the Indians. In fact, I think it's Republic Day. I don't remember when Republic Day is. But
it's January 26th.
It's February 26th or January?
January 26th, yeah.
Okay, so it already happened. So, yeah, so January 26th, on Republic Day, Abe went down to India. He was invited as a guest, and if anybody knows about Republic Day in India, that's only like the closest allies are invited to an event like that. Now, we know, okay, this is what the Western bankers are doing. Okay, and I want people to listen very carefully. It's very important information. The bankers' biggest problem is China and Russia. They're the ones spearheading, number one, this whole entire gold-backed trade note. They're the ones who are engineering this global realignment out of not just the dollar, okay, but out of the whole entire Western banking system. But the banksters also know a little bit about it, just a little bit. And they know that India and China has always been an uneasy partnership between the two. In fact, it was in '63, you had the Sino-Indian War, okay, that was fought within the mountains near I think it was near Burma. I think.
No, around Tibet and eastern side of India, yes.
Exactly.
My dad was in that war, yes, he was in the army then.
Oh, wow. And that was a loss that India took, okay? And India always remembers that. And one thing people don't understand about Chinese and Indian culture is they have very long memories, okay? You have that issue with China in '63. And then in May of '74, what did India do? India detonated its first atomic bomb, okay, which at that point put them on the sanctions list with the UN for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, okay, that put them on that sanctions list, okay. So since '74, all the way till about 2007, India was under some sort of a sanction. Okay, even though it wasn't a full-blown sanction like they have on Iran or Iraq at that time, but it was still a sanction. It affected the economy at some point. Then something happened in 2007. George W. Bush all of a sudden goes to India and says, you know what, that sanction that you've had for a while, we're going to go ahead and cancel that sanction. We're going to lift it. All of a sudden, the sanction gets lifted, and then they announce all sorts of military exercises between the U.S. and India. The last one, I think, was in 2000. A major one was in 2008, which is called COPE India, which is between the Indian Air Force and the American Air Force, which, by the way, the Indian Air Force did a fantastic job in taking out the Americans. But that exercise occurred, okay? So all of a sudden you see that this flood gates were open for more Western involvement, more Western development, more Western corporations going into India, and then you've had, I follow a lot of the defense news because that's another aspect that I do. India had their, fighter competition, okay, for a new medium-range Air Force fighter jet. Right. It's called the Merca competition. It's going to be the largest awarded contract in aviation history in terms of the amount of planes that the Indians are looking to buy. And for the first time, guess who's in there competing against everybody else? The Americans. It's unprecedented. Then you have the American aircraft carrier, I think it was Enterprise, that showed up right off the coast of the Arabian Sea in India, where they got into joint exercise with the Indian Navy. So you're seeing all of this happening, and guess what? The Chinese and the Russians are taking a step back, and they're like, what's going on here? This has not gone unnoticed by the Chinese, and this is probably the most worrisome thing to me, because the Americans and the banksters know that if they can stir up enough problems, okay, and they can what's the word I'm looking for? If they can puff India up a little bit, hey, we'll give you this technology transfer. And in fact, the last fighter competition, Paul, they were even willing to offer that the F-35, their new Joint Strike Fighter, to the Indians. Okay, so these are very tempting things to India to look at. Like, well, here's the thing, because we all hear about the modernization of the Chinese military, and now India is thinking, hey, this is great, because it would be wonderful. This is the old British model, Paul, of divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Okay, to create a rivalry, because India and America were never really on good. They were on okay terms. They were never on great terms or good terms. Okay, and America always had a hedge against India, a proxy against India. That was Pakistan. Right. Well, what happened to Pakistan? Well, when you start, droning Pakistanis at weddings, and you start flying cruise missiles over into their borders and violating their airspace on a daily basis, you kind of lose your ally. So the Pakistanis started cozying up to the Chinese. And now India is aligning itself a little bit with America. So you have a little bit of a wild card scenario based on what the Indians will do. Okay? Now, that being said, now here's the funny thing. People also got to realize this. India does what's best for India. Okay? And they do things, and they've always had that neutrality thing. During the Cold War, they never really officially said, hey, we're on the side of the Soviets. They never expressed, they never drew a line in the sand saying which side they're on.
They were the leader of the non-aligned countries. That was there's a little bit of history here, because Indira Gandhi was assassinated in 1984, and then her son Rajiv Gandhi, who was prime minister later on, he also was assassinated in the 90s. And one of the major reasons, I believe, for these assassinations was because the Gandhis, up until that time, they kept a very tight lid on India in keeping it non-aligned, neither with the Soviets, although they had a big military partnership with the Russians, and the Russians must now be very, ticked off that they're buying all this equipment from America. But Indira Gandhi and her son, they kept Indian markets closed to multinational companies, which was a good model for India, because it is not really set up to be like, run for all these multinationals to go in there and then suck all the profits out of there. It was a much better economy when it was a closed economy. People were better off. And now some people are benefited and they become like filthy rich, but the majority of the people have become even more destitute than they already were. So I think those two assassinations were carried out simply for the purpose of opening up Indian markets.
Absolutely. So you see that nothing is an accident or coincidence, but it's a calculated infiltration that they've been doing for years. They've been doing it for decades, Paul, and that is to get the realignment of India, because it is a democracy, and so a democracy, okay, it's a democratic republic. That is easier to infiltrate than, say, a closed communist system like China, okay, where the state controls everything. You see?
Right.
So you have the assassinations, and you have the opening of the multinational things. Now, at the same time, while this is happening, here's the interesting thing. India signs that agreement between the Turks and the Iranians to go ahead and buy and sell oil, to buy oil and to pay for it in gold, bypassing the dollar. So you see, India's kind of split again. That's why I call it a wild card. And based on how they go, it can really affect the BRICS setup. Now, that being said, I really believe that the agreements that the Indians are doing, I think the Indians could be just playing the Western bankers at their own game, allowing them to, show off technology, doing all sorts of technology transfers, but not really realigning with them financially, because I think that's kind of what I see going on. And I hope that India stays the course of the BRICS, because if they do, then you have a fantastic setup that's going to really realign the world and get the world away from this toxic dollar. Because think about it, Paul. Here we have this incredible quantitative easing, this money printing, and all this talk about tapering, this nonsense. So every country that has to deal with energy, that has to deal with food surplus, all sold in dollars, has to face the sting of dollar devaluation. And that's why when you have so many countries in the emerging markets and in the third world where they're facing that sting of higher food and energy prices. So going back to the gold-backed trade note, that is the major competing idea. And I truly believe, it's already happening. We're seeing it being set up. It's already being used in some way with the Iranian, Turkish, and Indian gold settlement for oil. We've seen this also occurring with other nations. So it's already being beta tested. So it's already happened. So you can see that the handwriting is very clear on what's going to happen here next with the U.S. and the dollar takedown, because this reset. You look. I wrote about this months ago, and I said, we're talking about an economic reset. We're talking about, 70, 80% devaluation of the dollar. That's tremendous.
That's catastrophic, I would say. Now, one anecdote I wanted to give you, V, was I know somebody who's high up in a major municipal government who was at one time in Canada here, and they go to these meetings, budget meetings, where they talk about money and finance. And he said that he went to one of these meetings, and in that meeting, the chairperson of the meeting said the decision. This was going back to, I would think, even back to 2006 maybe. Okay, and he said that this chairperson said the decision has been made. These were his words. The decision has been made to bring down the U.S. dollar, and. This person said his jaw just dropped, but most people that were in the room, they're not really well versed in these matters, so it just kind of went right over their head. So this here is not something what we are seeing, I guess, has been in the works for quite some time now, but we are sort of getting now to the end of the game. We're probably in the fourth quarter by now, I would think.
Yep, absolutely. We're in the final stages. That's why you have a person like Janet Yellen as the Fed chair, where, she's done nothing. She is the perfect, gopher boy. And one of my colleagues said it best. He said, Janet Yellen is like the Lyndon Baines Johnson.
What's
She's somebody. She's somebody who's been in the system so long. I mean,
Right.
she spent her whole life in the Fed. She knows where all the skeletons are buried. So, she's the perfect acolyte to go on ahead and close this whole thing out. And, I mean, who better than Janet Yellen, who's the perfect yes girl? She rubber stamped everything that Bernanke's ever done. She's never stood really in any sort of real opposition to anything of those said policies from Bernanke or even Greenspan. And so she's going to close this out. I mean, she wanted to be the Fed chief. And, she does this. She gets to be the one who goes down with the ship, number one. But at the same time, Paul, she becomes the one who cements Bernanke's as well as Greenspan's legacy. You see, Bernanke is not going to get blamed for this when the history books are written. This is all going to fall on Yellen. So it's pretty ironic that these elitists, these New World Order sycophants, have chosen a woman and a black man, and at the time to just completely run and collapse things. I mean, how sexist and how racist. I mean, there's got to be some sort of an irony there,
Yeah, there has to be. And I was also wondering, why do they always pick these women called Janet, like Janet Reno and Janet Napolitano?
Yeah.
Janet Yellen. What's with this name, Janet? That's just, I'm sure it means nothing, but, just came into my head.
Well, that's a good point. I gotta go look up the name Janet.
I know, maybe there's something. Who knows? Who
knows?
I'm at a point in my life where I don't dismiss anything until it can be proven to be wrong. Anything is possible, my friend. Anything is possible. So now going back, if you can just step back a little bit, like to the beginning of the program, you were talking about these suicidal bankers, killing themselves. Some of them by shooting themselves with nail guns 7 times. So what do you think is behind all these sudden spate of banker suicides?
Well, this is definitely tying up loose ends. Okay, I mean, look at Richard Talley. Okay, this is a recent guy. He was found dead in his home. He had multiple self-inflicted wounds from a nail gun. Okay, like 6 times. Now, his company that this guy founded was investigating, for all sorts of fraud, and he had, from what I hear, various connections, okay? And this guy was found dead in his garage, and none of this makes any sort of sense because he's definitely tied in. I mean, this is his company was, I think it was called American Title, and that was being investigated by insurance regulators, okay? Then you had Mike Duker. This guy worked for Russell Investments for 5 years. And he was found dead near the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in Washington State. All right? I mean, the guy was reported missing, and the police said they found him, And he's fallen about 30 feet to his death, and he jumped off a bridge, 30 feet, okay? Mm-hmm. It's a joke. Then you have the J.P. Morgan guy, one of the execs over there, Gabriel McGee. This guy jumped from the 33rd floor at the London headquarters. Okay?
33rd floor, right?
33rd floor. And of course, that's all coincidence, right? You had Carl Swin. Okay, now here's a kicker for you. Managing director of Tata Motors. Found dead on the 4th floor. Okay? Now, he was attending a board meeting over there, I think, with in the Thai capital. He was attending some sort of board meeting that had to do with some sort of trade agreements with the ASEAN nations, and there was some more involvement. I'm still waiting for more information on that. The other guy, I think, was William Brooksmith. Okay, the guy was a senior. Of course, he was a senior manager for Deutsche Bank. He found him hanging in his home from a so-called suicide. Okay, And the other guy, Tim Dickinson, the guy's a director at Swiss AG, and he was found dead. They just found him dead, and they had the circumstances are undisclosed. So that we also have a few more that are, trying to, what my guys are trying to find out if it's related or not. And that's Pierre Weissauer. Excuse me if I don't pronounce that name correctly. This guy was a CFO at Zurich Insurance Group. It's one of the largest insurance companies in the world. Okay, and he held both dual French and British citizenships. Okay, and he was found dead at his Lakeland front home. It said that when the cops just showed up, and they said the guy's probably looks like he's taking his own life. The guy's 53 years old. Okay, and then there's Maurice Earnhardt, young guy. He was an intern over at Bank of America. Okay, said the guy was young. And the kid was like 21, 22 years old.
Oh, man.
So he had an epileptic seizure while in the shower during a 7-week intern program in London. The guy has no medical history of any of this stuff. So something's going on here. And right now, how many did I just name off you? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys so far and counting. And it's only been, what, 3 weeks, 2 weeks?
Yes.
And from what I'm being told, because you have at least 43 guys on that list. 43. So these are a lot of the loose
Jamie Dimon on that list? Or Blankfein?
I mean, guys like Blankfein and Diamond would be the people that are probably coordinating and calling the hits.
Yeah, they're probably making the list, right? Yeah,
exactly. No, we won't be so lucky to see Blankfein on there.
This is just insane, like how crazy this world is. So most people who are just kept sedated by this mindless entertainment and sports, for them, like this kind of information is just goes right over their head. But obviously, this is indicative, like you said, about tying loose ends, that something big is in the works, and anybody that could have thrown a wrench in the works, they are eliminating them so that whatever's coming can be executed according to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, you got to look at it this way. People tell me all the time, well, these bankers, maybe it's suicide, kind of like in 1933 when the bankers jumped out of the building and killed themselves. Well, there's a problem with that, folks. Those bankers' suicides in 33 happened after the crash. Okay, after the crash, these guys began jumping out of the windows. Today, we're seeing things happening before any sort of crash, number one. But we know of many, many different frauds that are going on, all sorts of criminal activity that has transpired within the Western banking system. And it just so happens that these men are in positions where they have access type of information, or they know somebody, or they're within that sphere of influence. And that's why they're being knocked off. I was the first guy to really break the story on Deutsche Bank. And, I told you, Deutsche Bank is a bank that, every night they're on the verge of collapse. Well, I know this because I was family members who's one of the heads at Deutsche Bank. Okay, and every night they are on the verge of collapse. And most probably they will either be bailed out, but in the process of being bailed out by the German government, they're going to be chopped up into a million little pieces. Kind of like what the Brits have done to RBS. Look at RBS. RBS sold off some of the most profitable divisions in their company. Okay, the most profitable divisions. They just chopped and sold it off. Okay, you ask yourself, well, that doesn't make any sense. Well, it does make sense when you owe so much ridiculous amounts of debt and you have a lot of collateral to pay back. And it makes perfect sense. Same reason why you have a lot of these multinational banks. You're going to see a lot of headquarters and a lot of assets and real estate being sold off. JP Morgan selling off their stuff to the Chinese. You know, these things are happening because we're near the end. The banker suicides or these are homicides. Okay, these are all coming to be, okay, because we're heading towards that point when that which is unsustainable comes to an end. And so that's why 2014 is so critical.
By the sounds of it, you know, like these European banks, not just Deutsche Bank, but like I was said today, the story of Zero Hedge about Barclays laying off 12,000 people while the executives are giving themselves bigger bonuses. You know, yeah, go figure that. We destroy the company, but we got to make more money. And then something which has not been in the news lately is the French banks. Because the French banks like Crédit Agricole and, you know, whatever the other major French banks are there.
Yeah, Société Générale, PNB, Paribas.
Right, so they are all in big trouble too, are they not? Not just Deutsche Bank, like from what this story sort of disappeared, but I know.
You know, I about 2 years ago, I put out an alert, and it's floating around there on the internet about the French banks. And this was back in 2012, in the middle of the whole entire Euro crisis. You know, I had boots on the ground, and one of the things that I wanted to highlight is, like, you know, one of the things I said, folks, well, let's not be distracted by the pigs. Let's not focus on Greece and Spain and Portugal and Italy and Ireland. Let's not focus on those things. Let's talk about what the real nexus of this problem that is called the euro is. And it's France. Okay, France is the nexus on which the euro spins around. And the French banks are just as bad as Deutsche Bank. They're just as much in trouble as J.P. Morgan or Bank of America or Barclays or Lloyd's. They are just as bad. And that is the dirty little secret of the Eurozone, because, you know, the French don't like to hang their laundry. But that's the dirty little secret. And that's the thing most people are not talking about. When you have Société Générale, who's loaded to the gills on derivatives, on all sorts of just garbage, toxic assets, their books are completely rife with fraud, with accounting gimmicks, with all sorts of toxic mess that they are just as bad, and that's something that people are not talking about. And that's why this unraveling, look, Deutsche, okay, people don't realize, Deutsche, if that goes pop, RBS goes pop. RBS goes pop, pop goes Barclays. Barclays goes, so does Société Générale. Okay? They go PNB Paribas. They go, I mean, this is going to create a massive, okay, bank failures in the Eurozone, and you can expect when that happens, Bank of America goes belly up as well, which could also lead to J.P. Morgan taking the hatchet.
So the whole system is, it's like dominoes, you know, they're all leaning against one against the other, and any one of these shocks, you know, could set the whole chain collapsing, and I think that has to happen sometime too, because even if the government, the German government bails out Deutsche Bank, if Deutsche Bank does indeed face some serious problems, then it is no way that those ripples or those shock waves are not going to, you know, blow into Paris and into London and across the pond into New York and then basically all around the world.
Yeah, and it's going to go to, London and you know, New York. It's going to jump to Tokyo. You're going to see a systemic takedown of the entire Western banking system. And that's when, you know, I mean, what's the Fed going to do then? What are all the central banks going to do then? Are they going to use what, you know, many in the industry, what we've been calling the nuclear option, which is basically the central bank buys everything. They buy every single bad auto loan out there, every single shred of debt, every single piece of bad mortgage, every single defaulted company. I mean, is that every bank that has failed, are they just going to go ahead and buy them out? Are they going to use the nuclear option? And if they do that, then what's left? I mean, the system has no credibility anymore. And that's the biggest panic. You see, in order for you to run a Ponzi scheme, Paul, you got to have some sort of semblance of credibility in order to sucker the next quote-unquote investor. But when you lose credibility, guess what? You lose quote-unquote investors. And that's what's happening. We're seeing a massive loss of credibility within the system.
You know, these stories come up from time to time, which really don't make sense to me. Like, you know, I'm not as well versed or with that sort of background that you have, so maybe you can enlighten us a little bit. I read this story about this Harvard professor who went and pulled out $1 million out of Bank of America, and suddenly the story is, oh, Bank of America is going to collapse now because this Harvard professor pulled out $1 million. That doesn't make sense to me. And if $1 million is going to put this bank under, man, how precarious is this situation in this bank? It seems like to me that this is a planted story, but it could indicate that Bank of America is in trouble. What do you think?
Well, you know, I don't know about the professor pulling out $1 million because number one, they would never give him $1 million in cash. And, you know, number two, if they give him $1 million, it'll definitely be either a wire transfer, it's all electronic, or a printed check, which at the end of the day, it's really nothing. But the fact does remain is that we know for a fact that every week there are banks that are going to the Federal Reserve window. And the Federal Reserve window is where banks go when they need money in order to cover operational expenses and operational costs. I know for a fact that there are banks that show up to the Federal Reserve window that go there to borrow as little as $10,000 to cover their expenses because they don't have even $10,000.
Is that like major banks, or are you talking about some smaller banks here? Because that seems, if that applies to something like a Citibank or something, that's really scary if they have to go and borrow $10,000.
This is not as big as Citibank. This is probably, I'd say, in the top 10, top 15 banks in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's scary if it's in the top 15 and they have to go and get $10,000. That
$10,000. Yep. To cover their expenses.
So that means that this house of cards could collapse at any moment then if it's that weak, the system is that weak?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing I always talked about is that we not only have a liquidity crisis, we have a solvency crisis. So we have the best of both worlds. And that's creating such a strain on banking that, you know, this whole thing is a house of cards. It really is. It's being held together by nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's what makes it so vulnerable. And I fear, and I don't fear it, but I know that with what's happening with the dollar on the macro level on the global stage is just going to put this whole thing to rest.
Okay, well, you know, I can't say that I disagree with you because what you are saying and what I have read and heard from many people, it makes too much sense. What doesn't make sense to me is all these talking heads on MSNBC or CNBC, etc., whatever, you know, whatever nonsense that they spout all day long. That does not make sense to me, but what you are saying makes total sense to me. So if this is, you are aware of this, and I'm aware of this, and like we discussed about a little while back, then of course nations like China and all the other ones that have a vested interest, which have far more dollars than you and I have, they certainly know about it. And as you said, they've already made plans to, they're looking at a post-dollar world. And if if the dollar is indeed devalued by 70, 80%, I can't imagine what life in America will be like then. I don't know. How would they handle it? Americans would be, it would be the end of the country, would it not?
It is. And you know, it's one thing, you know, for you to know that you're on the Titanic.
You know, the thing about the Titanic, Paul, is it only had a limited number of lifeboats. The goal here is to get on the lifeboat and get off the ocean liner way before it hits the iceberg. Okay, and that's the key, because the Americans, when this happens, when this reset happens, they're not going to be able to handle what's coming. They're not going to be able to have their real estate values chopped considerably. They're not going to be able to handle their purchasing power chopped. And Paul, you know, even then, I mean, you look at this whole thing, and this brings another point to my mind, is, look, I'm in New York, and Sullivan County is maybe like a 2-hour drive, okay, from Manhattan. In Sullivan County, which has been a county that's been pretty much one of the poorest counties in New York, you know, it used to be, you know, you had all sorts of mills and farming and industry over there, but now it's no longer. The Chinese have set up an industrial park. And they're setting up industrial parks in Idaho. They're setting up in Detroit. They're buying idle manufacturing. They're doing a lot of things. And the thing that people need to understand is, why the heck are China doing that? Well, it's simple. Number one, it's collateral, because, you know, they got to own the land somehow. And number two, they're getting ready. Get ready for this, Paul. They're getting ready that when the reset occurs and the dollar loses 70 to 80% of its value, guess who becomes the future sweatshop of the world? That's right. Exactly. Wow. You want to talk about cheap labor? You no longer have to go to Cambodia or Vietnam. You do it right here in the U.S. of A. And I've said this years ago, that American kids, these teenagers, they're the ones who are going to be making the future Nike sneakers in sweatshops right here.
Would you say that that's, in a manner of speaking, that's poetic justice?
It is. It is. Whatsoever you shall sow, you shall reap. And that is the universal law, my friend. I think a wise man once told me, you could never break God's laws. You could only confirm them. And that is confirmation right there. I mean, that is poetic justice. You know, we went around the world for the last 30, 40 years, taking our God-given wealth and our God-given blessings, and what do? We squandered it by pillaging, plundering, and raping other nations. I mean, Paul, in the last 50 years, we've overthrown 30 democratically elected governments, all up and down Central and South America. You know, you can't have a body count and cause as much suffering economically to so many people worldwide, such as we have done, and not be accountable. And you know, that day is coming, my friend. I mean, the day of the American putting his head in the sand is far to be over. I mean, there is a reason. There's no reason why idle manufacturing plants in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, in Cleveland, Ohio, okay, in Tennessee, in Arizona, and these things are being bought out, okay, and all over, even in the Rust Belt, being bought out, all right, by the Chinese. Why? Because they're getting ready. Because once that reset happens and the dollar loses 70 to 80% of its value, you have one of the lowest labor costs in the world at that point, my friend.
It's the picture that you're painting, like, you know, considering the fact that we are in this part of the world, it is truly a scary one, and I don't think anybody can even fathom like how bad things are going to get. So in this situation, one more question before I wanted to ask you what should we do, but before you answer that, last time we spoke, we didn't really get to it. You didn't get to elaborate on that, but maybe perhaps you can. You know, this story about China buying the headquarters of J.P. Morgan, which is of course linked to the Fed, and having the largest gold storage facility in the world, etc. What do you think is really going on there? Why would J.P. Morgan sell their headquarters to the Chinese? And I've heard that China is going to take over the Fed. Do you put any kind of stock in stories like that? What do you think is going on here?
No, China's not going to take over the Fed. But what I will tell you is this. J.P. Morgan, okay, that building I'm very familiar with, One Chase Plaza. And that is on Liberty Street, and it does share a tunnel underground with the New York Fed, which, I have a source that works there at the New York Fed. The New York Fed is, houses where, a lot of the gold over there, but the J.P. Morgan's gold vault is actually, I believe it's one of the largest private gold vaults in the world. I mean, the thing is, 10 stories underground. It's about the size of a football field. It's huge. It's massive. Now, that building, Paul, and if anybody's been down Manhattan and taken a look at that building, that skyscraper is worth a little over $2 billion. Okay? The Chinese bought it, I think, for about $720 or $750 million. So about half, well, less than half. They bought it for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
Why the heck? And I want people out there who, if you're still doubting, if you still have your head in the sand, if you still think this is all just a made-up make-believe and everything will be okay and our leaders will save us, why do you think J.P. Morgan sold their headquarters for a fraction of what it costs, of what it's worth? Simple. They made a deal somewhere. That deal did not go through, and my friend, that is collateral. Okay? That is collateral. And I believe, okay, there's a tie-in to, if you guys remember, back in 2012. And again, I was the guy who broke this one. Remember London Whale?
Yes.
London Whale, they said, the guy lost, what, $2 billion? Then it turned out it was $5 billion. Then it came out $10 billion. And some people said, but as soon as it said $2 billion, I had from my sources it was over $150 billion that was lost. And then months, almost a year later, we had somebody leak saying that it was over $100 billion, confirming what I said. That there is a link between the London Whale loss and the recent purchase of that building in One Chase Plaza by the Chinese. They are collecting their collateral. That's what's going on.
So it was the Chinese money that was lost in London Whale, and now they're collecting on that debt.
They're collecting on that. That's one of the things that are being kicked around. Yeah.
Yeah, this whole thing doesn't make sense, like for the U.S. government to allow like a foreign power to come in and purchase such strategic, parts of your country, which is manufacturing and banking. And I heard that the Russians had bought Goldman Sachs commodities trading desk or something like that. So
yeah, they bought Morgan Stanley's. Morgan Stanley ran the pricing for oil, which is called Platts.
Right.
And the Russians have bought out Platts. I mean, you see this chess game. Remember what I told you, Paul? The only weapon that the U.S. has is paper and bombs. Okay? But we are being checkmated by the Russians and Chinese strategically, and we're going to be brought to our knees without one shot being fired.
Yes, it seems apparent, and I suppose that really there are no allies left in this game, because ultimately whoever sits atop, everybody below them is always happy to see them topple. That's just human nature. So right. I guess the fall of America is not going to be mourned by most people. I mean, it'll make me very sad, because it is not something that I look forward to. But there are a lot of people in this world who will not be bothered by that one little bit. They're actually looking forward to it. And then if they are looking forward to it, then they're also going to be actively working, and I'm sure the Russians are very actively working at this to bring it about. Russia is kind of a wild card, because they are still one of the greatest. They are the second largest and most powerful military nation in the world. and but they have sort of taken a backseat to China. And I'm wondering if behind the scenes, they are still, or they might even be, controlling the Chinese. Who knows?
I mean, who knows? Exactly. And that's the whole thing. But, one thing that is certain is that the Russians and the Chinese work very closely together. And it's a coordinated effort. It's a coordinated effort, and you see this coordinated effort from, Russia setting up China as a wholesaler and allowing the Russians to extract the oil and be involved in the trade, and allowing the Chinese to monetize. And then you see what's happening with the Chinese. They bought out J.P. Morgan's headquarters, and then the Russians go out and buy the Platts, oil trade desk. I mean, these things are coordinated efforts. And at the same time, what's happening before this whole headquarters thing? What happened? J.P. Morgan gets out of commodities. Here's one of the big gold manipulators out of the commodities. Goldman Sachs getting out of commodities. Deutsche Bank is out of commodities. I mean, you see the handwriting on the wall. These are not isolated events. And when you start connecting the dots, it starts to create a very clear and big picture.
Now, these guys all getting out of commodities, is that, again, I suppose that's also related to the demise of the U.S. dollar, in that the time then will be coming when commodities will no longer be priced in dollars, and therefore, I mean, these guys have seen the handwriting on the wall, and they are fleeing the sinking ship. Would that be a logical conclusion?
Yeah, yes, it would. And also the fact is these guys are criminals. Remember, we cannot lose sight of the fact of the scandals on LIBOR. We cannot lose sight of the fact you had the finance guy from Germany, which I forget what his name was at the moment, but he's the one who said that the fraud in the gold manipulations, in the gold market, is something that's even worse than LIBOR. Okay, so this is huge. This is a prominent member in German finance saying this, and they're going on ahead. They're investigating the fraud in gold, and it's gotten to the point where Interpol is getting involved in this as well. So this is a very, very serious thing, and so for them to get out, there's a reason for that. I mean, look at Citigroup. Okay, Citigroup, their whole Forex desk, was cleared out. The head of Forex just left. Yeah, I'm stepping down. Out of nowhere, you're going to just step down from voluntarily? These things are happening because the rats, the king rats have left the ship, and that makes the dollar an unofficially dead currency. But now you're going to see the middle managers and the fall guys, and these guys are either scared, or they're being killed, or they're committing suicide, or something's happened. Okay, something's happening. Something is moving through the system. Something is happening that's causing all of this, Paul, and we can see it as clear as day. Okay, this is not isolated. When you have the head of your Forex desk stepping down, your whole department being moved, and then you have divisions being all of a sudden that was actively involved for decades. All of a sudden, you're just going to shutter them. These are all maneuvers. They're cutting their losses, my friend. They're cutting their losses because there's some big things coming. Big things, Paul.
Well, it seems like that way. So could this also imply that this floating exchange rates, this whole regime is going to come to an end soon if they're getting rid of their Forex desks and all that?
Yeah, they have to, because the Forex is, first of all, the Forex is rife with fraud. The Americans always say, they always cry about China. You're always manipulating your currency. We're the biggest currency manipulators in the world. So this is a case of the kettle calling the pot black. The Chinese are like, what are you talking about? We're manipulating. You're doing the same thing, and you've been doing it a lot longer than we have. It's like you're the guys who started manipulating.
Well, they don't like competition. That sticker, something about the government hates competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes. So these guys, they are the masters that they don't want.
Yeah. Don't steal. Don't steal. The government hates competition. That was the sticker.
So yes. So gold, by the sounds of it, okay, if this whole thing with this gold exchange trade note and all these Eastern governments I've heard, like China and India, of course, has a lot of gold, and China has been accumulating gold hand over fist, as has Russia and a lot of other nations in that part of the world, except perhaps for Japan. Japan, I think, is a basket case which you can address, but if this is indeed the case with gold, then the repricing of gold, which it may not even happen in dollars anymore, is going to be rather dramatic by the sounds of it, don't you think?
It's going to be absolutely massive, $20,000, maybe $50,000 an ounce.
So, I mean, this is where people really have to start thinking in terms of not dollars necessarily, but the purchasing power, where as an ounce of gold, let's say we were to value it in terms of real estate right now. I mean, an ounce of gold is not really going to, or 10 ounces of gold is not going to buy anybody a house or a condo or something. But after this reset takes place, and gold is also revalued, gold is revalued higher, much higher, whereas the dollar is devalued much lower, then at that time the purchasing power of gold is going to increase exponentially, is it not?
The price of gold is going to absolutely skyrocket. It's going to explode at that point. It's going to be, okay, I want people to listen very carefully. When this happens, the economic principles that have been ignored and suppressed for so long, the principles of supply and demand, those principles for the first time in a long time will again be applied to gold, and you will see gold break out from its high 1200s, okay, where it sits currently, into the stratosphere. 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 an ounce is not out of the scope of reality. It really isn't.
It has to go up that high, I would think,
Yeah. Yeah, it has to, because the supply levels are so tight. Gold in the LMBA, there's no gold in COMEX, there's no gold anywhere in the Western banking system. Look, I mean, the Germans were crying, hey, we want our 670 metric tons of gold back from the Fed. And the Fed's like, oh, I tell you what, we'll start giving back to you about 36, about 100 tons a year. We'll start off with 36 metric tons, and what do the Germans receive? 5 metric tons. Okay, 5 metric tons. It's unbelievable. A lot of the gold that's being out there is being deplated. So it's going from 0.9999 pure to 0.9993. I mean, we hear, look, I've never heard about, Swiss refiners ever having a problem with a backup. Now they're backed up 2-3 weeks. Now the Chinese are bypassing all this. They're actually buying gold ingots. China's like, we're going to set up our own refinery, we'll refine it ourselves. They're going into, places like Africa, and they're buying right from the mine. Because, look, you got to understand, gold at around $1,200 an ounce, it's not worth it for many mining companies to go ahead and extract the metal because it's costing them close to $1,300 an ounce. So it's a negative net profit for them. Okay, it's a net negative. So why do something with a net negative when all of a sudden the Chinese come on board and they say, hey, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and get those ingots out for me? And those ingots, for people that don't know, they're about 90% pure gold. They're buying these ingots. Okay, they're buying the ingots at the point of manufacture. I mean, it's unheard of. So these are so the actual physical supplies are being dried up. And folks, let me tell you something. In the last 11 to 12 years, we have not found a single new vein of gold anywhere in the world. Nowhere.
So now what you're saying, with these Chinese are setting up their own refineries, is it not also true that there is so much distrust of London and even Switzerland now that they are also setting up depositories in Singapore and in Hong Kong. They're building their own storage facilities because they don't trust the Western bankers anymore?
Yeah, one of the largest depository vaults in the world is actually going up in Singapore. It's being constructed over there, okay? I have my clients' stuff either in Hong Kong, okay, or in Singapore, right? Singapore has basically, when the U.S. was putting out their FATCA thing where the banks have to report on Americans making their deposits or Americans placing their assets in that country, Singapore just told America to go take a hike. We're not doing any of that. Whereas the Swiss has bent over backwards. So sure, do whatever you want, okay? There is a huge mistrust towards the Western bankers. And the secrecy and the confidence that the Swiss once had, it's gone. Okay, because why? The Swiss are replating gold. The Swiss have made some bad deals. Folks, people don't understand. At times, when you're putting your gold into a vault in certain of these Western, vaulting companies, at times your gold's not safe. Okay, we're seeing replated gold coming out of Switzerland, serial numbers being changed, all sorts of things. And that mistrust is growing and it's causing a massive migration over to Singapore, over to Hong Kong, and heck, even like, even in Panama is setting up a gold vault down there, because these are people that are leaving. They want some sort of security, and I'll be honest, I got clients of mine in Uruguay and in other parts, and in Paraguay, and the best way they get hold of gold and silver is they actually fly out to Panama and get their gold. It's the best place to buy in all of South and Central America. So these things are happening. There's a massive mistrust. That's what I said. You only have a Ponzi scheme so long as you have confidence in quote-unquote investor confidence. But once that confidence dries up, my friend, your Ponzi scheme is over. And that's the whole point. Our Ponzi scheme is over. Now, the system is just running rudimentarily until the whole dollar is flushed completely out of it and purged. And that purge is coming very soon.
So what you're saying is that it's a con game, and it's apparent to us it's only the foolish sheeple out there who, in America, who don't see this coming, and they're the ones that are going to be caught with their pants down, and it is going to be a catastrophe for most people. And
it's going to be horrific.
So we who are aware of this, what's coming, we have some time yet, although it's running out rapidly, to position ourselves through some purchases of metals, gold if you can, or even silver. Silver right now sounds like is a very good bargain. Would you agree?
Silver is the bargain of a lifetime. Okay, it has tremendous upside. I like silver a lot. I love platinum. Platinum has a tremendous upside. I'm just as bullish on platinum, as I am on silver or gold, simply because, number one, platinum is more rare than silver and gold. It costs the mining company about $1,370, $1,300, $1,370 per ounce to get platinum out of the ground. So when platinum's trading, below that, it's not worth it. And there's only two countries in the world that produce platinum. And that's South Africa, which is like the Saudi Arabia platinum. And you got Russia. The Russians aren't selling anything. They're more palladium oriented, but they're not selling any platinum or palladium to the West. And you have South Africa, which had mining collapses. They've had massive labor problems where you have, labor walking right off. Mining, a lot of the mines in South Africa are going into, they're going into tender and care service, maintenance and care. So you have mining shutdowns. You have also South Africa. They just purchased about 400,000 ounces of platinum for a South African platinum ETF. So the supplies on platinum are constrained, and people ask me all the time, well, V, why don't they just,
find more mines in other parts of the world? And the answer is simply just can't, because platinum is it's an extraterrestrial metal. It's not something of this earth. It got here through asteroid strikes. Okay, and they are, not at the same level of gold and silver, but they are monetizing platinum. So, that platinum has a tremendous upside. But any three of those metals, I love. I love gold. I love silver. I love platinum. I have, I don't have a huge amount of silver, but I have enough to move around because, let's be honest here, you have about, 1,500 ounces of silver. It's very heavy. You can't really readily carry that around,
Right.
And it's a nightmare. And if if I have it vaulted, but the shipping costs on silver are like twice that of gold simply because of the weight.
Yeah. Agreed. I mean, it's for people like who don't have $50,000 or something to invest, who may only have 5,000 or something. Then maybe it's wise to buy an ounce of gold and put the rest in silver. And hopefully when things do these things they do come to a conclusion, and silver does come to that 15-to-1 ratio with gold, and gold goes up to 10,000 or something like that, that would automatically mean that silver is going to be 150 or thereabouts an ounce, which is of course a good return on your money. But at the same time, it is not just as an investment, but it is as a protection to protect what we have. So that when what happened in Argentina, when their currency is being was devalued and people were dumpster diving, that won't happen to us. Now, one of the results of this gold suppression scheme has been that it has killed exploration. So that's one of the reasons why there are no new mines and no new supply coming on board, because the price is too low for these guys to go looking for gold. Is it not so, V?
Absolutely. It's just not worth it. And I think, it's not only not worth it, it's, you take that into account. You take into account the incredible demand. Here we have it in the U.S., gold trading from the high 1200s, low 1300s. When you go over to Asia, you're paying, $1,800 an ounce. It's such a demand for this stuff. And it's far outstripping the supply. And the prices being so low, it's just like, what mining company, mining is a very risky business. What mining company wants to go ahead and start mining? Number one. Number two, where the heck would you mine? Would you go mine in Mexico where, you have a rash of kidnappings that have occurred? Would you go into the Africa where there was certain areas in mining you either have some serious economic labor problems, or some places are outright civil war? I mean, what do you do? I mean, is that worth the money? So no, what's going to happen is the mining companies are going to sit there, they're going to hold back, and they're going to wait for this price reset, and then they're going to go back in. And that's exactly what's going to happen. It just doesn't make any sense for them to go in now.
I guess the only politically stable country where gold mining is an option is Canada, but then Canada has, like Barrick Gold and all these, which are just a part of the gold suppression scheme. They are all, they have their own problems, don't they?
Tremendously. Barrick is one of the most corrupt companies in the world.
Well, now let's talk about this scenario when it develops. And last time we talked about that, this could be something like the times of Rodney King, and you were talking about how on Black Friday they have people that go into Walmarts and they fight and even kill each other over a pair of sneakers. Is that one of the reasons why, especially in the United States, you have seen such a proliferation of the militarization of police forces, where you have police forces that have armored vehicles? It looks like, they are going to do battle against a major nation or something with all this equipment that they have, which is indeed very scary. And is that the powers that be, they have positioned essentially to protect themselves from the masses when this collapse comes?
Absolutely. I mean, the militarization of police, people don't know the history of this, is pretty important. we never had SWAT teams, special weapons and tasks. We never had. For the majority of the length of time of law enforcement history here in this country. A lot of these things, and there's nothing that even now, today, in today's complex world, that a typical police department can't handle. So a lot of the defense contractors got together and said, you know what, we got to figure out a way to start selling our wares to police departments. And one of the ways they got around to doing that is, if people remember, those that live in the States, and I don't know if they showed it in Canada or not, but in the 70s there was a TV show called SWAT, S-W-A-T. And SWAT glamorized a special team of police, rapid response, team that handle hostage situations, emergencies, and things of that sort. And ever since they created SWAT, which was basically something that was funded by the Defense Department and the defense industry, excuse me, you've seen a clamoring nationwide from various police groups that want something like that. LA wanted it. LAPD, we want a SWAT. NYPD launched their ESU, Emergency Services Unit. Okay? You've seen it happen. Then it went from large cities to small towns, where you have a small town where a cop would have to respond to a rabid raccoon or a domestic dispute between a husband and wife. That's pretty much the only thing that goes on. And now that town has like armored tanks and police personnel, with full-on battle gear. And the battle gear you look at is the same exact battle gear that a U.S. soldier would have, but it's black. And now they're using SWAT teams to serve warrants. I mean, this is the most insane thing in the world. And what you see, this militarization is, and I've said it best. I've said it so many times. I said, when a country goes broke, it turns its security apparatus from looking for external threats, and it begins to turn its security apparatus on its own people. And that's what you see happening, because, they do know that in the midst of the economic collapse, there will be a breakdown of government. There will be all sorts. So they're ready and willing to use excessive force. But the problem becomes, how do you play these police officers? And then where do you cross the line before the American? And there will be individuals, and there will be millions of individuals in this country that would be awake, and they'll be armed to the teeth. And I feel sorry for any cop that wants to get into the crossfire of that situation, because every single simulation I've looked at, or it's the police forces versus the American people, or even the military versus the American people win 10-1, because this is still a country that's built on guns and whiskey. So it's going to be a stalemate. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's going to be pretty crazy, without a doubt.
And it is also most likely true that a lot of these cops would themselves perhaps wake up and not follow all their orders that might be enforced at that time, which I suppose would not be a bad thing for their health and for the health of the people.
Right.
But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. No, go ahead, Paul.
No, so that's what I was going to say, that yes, we do realize that this is happening, and in this situation, I think the more dangerous places would be like major cities like New York City, or especially when a large amount of population is where there's a high density of population. It's very easy. It's much easier to control that than it would be in the rural areas or widespread areas. So perhaps one of the things that people can do is to relocate, if at all possible, from major urban centers to somewhere smaller, where, for one thing, people know each other, and even the police are not quite what they are in LA or in Chicago or some of the other major cities.
Correct. Absolutely right. I mean, this is an opportunity where you have the remainder of the year at least, to really begin to, get your plan in action. If you're going to relocate, I recommend getting the heck out of the cities. Get into the countryside. Get out, 2-3 hours out. If you're able to leave the country, do that as well. I mean, there's some good choices out there, and I'm actually working on a huge project south of the equator, which is going to allow people to go away to. So if you, which is basically what we're in the process of doing right now. I'm actually in talks with some top governmental officials of a particular nation, and we are in the process of trying to get the framework up for an expatriate community, so people can go there and find it, and they can own their own land, have the mineral rights, have the water rights, and be able to own your own piece of heaven, so to speak, where you can have a safe haven to go to until these things blow over.
So what you're suggesting then, or at least if it is within a person's means, is to actually leave the United States at least temporarily, or to have something outside of the country, maybe not exclusively, but in addition to their residence within the U.S. itself.
Exactly. If people remember, in January, in the turn of the new year, Matt Drudge, this guy doesn't say much. He's got the #1 news website in the world. Okay, it is the news website that you have anchors from mainstream media go ahead and look at, try to get stories out of. Matt Drudge tweeted just a simple 4 words: have an exit strategy, or have an exit plan. That holds so true today, because there's really no advantage anymore of being an American. There really isn't. What's the advantage you got? You're being taxed to oblivion. You're having your freedom stripped away from you. You're being regulated to misery. You're being, just pillaged by a parasitic group of people whom you elect as your rulers. Just this year alone, what was the figure? Like 221% increase in people that renounced their U.S. citizenship. And more people are leaving the country. Why is that? Because number one, they see the handwriting on the wall as this nation is becoming more and more tyrannical. Number two, there is, when you look at the pros and cons, the cost versus the benefit, there's not much benefit. We're ranked number 7. I believe it was, I forgot which organization it was, that went ahead and ranks countries based on, their lack of freedom. We're number 7 on that list. Can you believe that? And we're on the bottom of the list, or near the bottom, for economic opportunities amongst developed nations. So, don't tell me about, some country in the African Congo or something like that. I'm talking about developed nations. We are on the bottom of the list for economic opportunity. So let me ask you a question. We have the worst educational system of any developed nation. So to my fellow Americans who are listening to my voice, what advantage do you have? I mean, if you got young children, you should get out of here. I mean, what are you waiting for? So you can stay around here and be taxed to death, have your freedom stripped away from you, have the state educate your kids, and instead of teaching them math and reading and science, they're teaching them how to put a condom on a cucumber.
Yeah,
this is what's happening.
Yes. Yes, it is. It is very, very sick what's happened. It is also a tragedy. We, like America, when I was growing up, I was in India at that time as a young boy. I mean, America is the country that the whole world looked up to. It was something almost magical about it, that and that was, of course, the freedom and it was a land of opportunity, but that has been turned on its head now, and that is obvious for all to see.
Well, it was the current administration that said change we can believe in. I mean, he certainly has changed things.
Oh, yeah.
Very rapidly.
So much, it's just unbelievable. Like, there were things have been changing. We who have been awake for a while saw these changes happening under Clinton and then under Bush and, but under Obama, it just seems to have taken a life of its own, how rapidly things are deteriorating. Not changing, yes, but changing for the worse, not for the better.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And they have ruined, Paul. They have ruined the finest economy the world has ever seen. They've ruined it in 5 years. It's unbelievable how fast they wrecked it.
How fast it's gone down. You're absolutely right. It's only been held together by the smoke and mirrors of QE and other shenanigans, but like you said, this can only go on for so long, and looks like we are now at the, very in the ninth inning, and the game is going to be over soon. Before we close off, V, could you just go ahead and tell listeners, your website and any other contact information, where they can get a hold of you, what services you offer, and of course you have a subscription that you offer to your website. Could you please give out that information?
Sure. The website is roguemoney.net. That's ROGUEMONEY.net. Roguemoney.net. If you go there, folks, it's a subscription site. The best part is it's only $2.99 per month. I write on there exclusively. I have some hot writers on there as well. We break a lot of stories on that site, and we're always ahead of the market every single time. Now, in terms of services, if you need consultation, if you need somebody to put together a plan of action for you that you can execute, you can contact me at gorillaeconomist@gmail.com. That's Gorilla Economist. That's spelled GUERRILLA, Economist, all one word, @gmail.com. And what I also have is, if you're an individual, you have debt, your credit is completely screwed up, you need to get your life back, you can contact me as well. I'll get you in touch with an associate of mine named Mr. Martin. The man is a genius. He can clean your credit up completely. He's helped me out personally. He's helped out so many of the guys that are in Wall Street. He is one of the best-kept secrets. Reach out to me if you need consultation. If you need to get precious metals, reach out to me as well, and I'll be able to help you with all that.
Fantastic. You're always, you have a wealth of information, and like I said, last time we did a program was about 6 weeks ago, and so much has really happened this year.
Yes.
Has started off with a bang, and I think if it's already started off with a bang, I think by the end of the year we might see a mushroom cloud the way it's going. But right, but that's what we have to expect, and we have to be ready for it, because that black swan that people have talked about for so long, it could just materialize any day. And that's where I am at that moment in my life where I think that, yes, I could just wake up any morning and this world could be literally turned upside down. So basically people should just think that the time has pretty much run out. The hourglass is, sand is running out very rapidly, and the time to prepare is very short. Can I share with you one thing? On your website you have this quote, banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin.
Yes.
Josiah Stamp, I think he was a Treasury Secretary or something, or one of these people who was if I recall correctly, he was in the government, somebody, right, who said this.
Yes. Yes.
You know what, that this actually, most people may not consider it, that this problem has, of course, spiritual roots. And people do not equate Satan with banking or with money. But in Ezekiel 28, this is in verse 15, it's talking about this anointed cherub who was the father of evil and sin in creation. It says, in verse 15, thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. And you know what the first iniquity that's mentioned in the next verse? It says, by the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence. In verse 18 it says, you have defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. This whole system of merchant banking and commerce and trade and money, it is traced all the way back to the very origin of sin and evil in God's creation. So that is why the Bible tells us that the love of money is the root way back to the very beginning of evil. So that's what I wanted to say. That quote that you have on your website, it is very scriptural, as a matter of fact. And I would like people to start thinking that the devil, man, he is not a creature with horns. He is a merchant banker. He wears Gucci and Armani suits, and he goes to these. He's the one that devises all these insane banking schemes and policies, which I don't think can come from any human mind. But anyways, that's
right.
No,
you're absolutely right, man. And one thing I will tell you, with Josiah Stamp, who was the former head of the Bank of England in the 1920s, his full quote was, banking was conceived in iniquity and was born in sin. The bankers own the earth, take it away from them, but leave them the power to create deposits, and with a flick of a pen, they will create enough deposits to buy it all back again. However, take it away from them, and all the fortunes like mine will disappear. And they ought to disappear, for this world will be a happier and better world to live in. But if you wish to remain slaves of the bankers and pay for the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create deposits. And that's what Josiah Stamps said in his full quote.
So in a way, it's good, if this system does somehow collapse, and if it is going to be replaced by something better, which is unlikely, because I guess they will again figure out a way to keep on creating these deposits, but at least we might have a season of tranquility and some sort of stability, which the world has experienced, very seldom, but at least that could be something good that might come out of this.
Absolutely.
So we, once again, it's been a pleasure having you on, my friend. It's always a joy to talk to you, and I'm sure the next time we speak again in another few weeks, much will have happened. And, again, I would advise all listeners to please go to your website, roguemoney.net, and to subscribe to it and keep yourself informed, because information and knowledge indeed is power in these times. So any closing words for us?
One thing I will always tell people is just keep vigilant. Keep vigilant. Keep listening to programs like Paul's, and keep following the news. Keep following. Join RogueMoney.net, and and most importantly, walk very closely with the Lord. And that's the most important thing. Without Him, you have nothing.
Amen. Amen. I will second that, because the first preparation and the last preparation is spiritual. It is understanding that, our days on this earth are few. They are like the dew on the grass, which is there in the morning and gone, soon as the sun rises. So we have to look beyond this body and to get the big picture of what our purpose is and what comes once we depart from here. We speak about economic matters because they are important to our life here, but that's not the be-all and end-all of life. So once again, this is Paul Sandhu on Wake Up and Live Radio. This is my guest today has been V, the Guerrilla Economist from RogueMoney.net, and I'm signing off now. Thank you, V, and I will talk to you soon again.
Thank you, Paul. Good day.
Okay. Bye.
You're back again, I'm glad to see. Got another chance to be forgiven and freed from sin. But you say no, I'll wait a while, and that just makes the devil smile, 'cause he knows that's all he needs to win. He knows that he can seal your fate if he can make you hesitate. If you could take a trip to hell, you'd see how this works so well on others. People just like you who thought that they had time, and they'd soon make up their mind to repent. Their chance came and went. Tomorrow is Satan's fate. He only wants to make you wait. Now's the accepted time. The Holy Spirit cries. Emotions making you delay are only Satan's lies. There's never been any less time before Christ is knocking at the door. Unlatch the bolt, let him come inside and throw away your foolish pride. You just can't lose. But if you choose to say perhaps some other day, you just push the Lord away and pick your friend. He'll burn you in the end. Two voices calling out to you, but which one are you listening to? If you would only take a glance, you'd see this might be your last chance.